Thank you. Thank you very much. As she said, it's set in the 1980s, and it's a legal novel. So it focuses on the financial industry, banks, that sort of thing. I'm going to set up, because I'm going to read from chapter 2, so I'll set up what happens in chapter 1, which is the setup. Luke Boyd is a young guy, and he started a mortgage banking company. And for those of you that don't know how mortgage banking companies work, I'll explain it to you real quickly. They borrow money from a bank, they make home loans, they take a group of those home loans and they pool them together, they pledge them as collateral for a bond, and they sell them to bond brokers in New York. They get the money from the bond broker, they pay off the bank, repeat the process. Rinse, repeat. Like all people, they have cash flow problems. Maybe they've got too many people looking for loans and they don't have enough credit line at the bank. And that's where our character Luke Boyd is. He's got $6 million worth of loans waiting to close, and he's at his maximum with the bank. He's asked for a credit line increase. They said they'll have it ready for him by next week, but he's short. He needs $6 million. He needs it by 3 o'clock so he can close the loans, or he's going to have to call a lot of people and tell them, you can't close this week, you can close next week. That doesn't go well usually. So that's where we are. He's gone to New York to meet with his broker. He thinks he's going to meet with one person, Frank Ryan. In fact, he'll meet with more than that. He's going to ask him to buy $6 million worth of loans early. Luke quickly checked his bags with the bellman, but he did not check into his room. There wasn't time for a taxi. Stiller Stevens was only 7 blocks away. He grabbed the cheapest black umbrella from a news store rack, slid a tin on the counter, picked up his change, and emerged from the Park Lane Hotel on Central Park's south side. Luke rapidly covered the blocks, turning left at the sign labeled Avenue of the Americas, 6th Avenue to him. The rain held back until he was safely in the lobby of the tower, and he headed straight to the elevators. Luke smiled at the receptionist and patiently stood until an assistant led him to the corner office. Frank Ryan was tall, athletic, and 46. His hair was full but beginning to thin with tinges of gray at the temple. His blue eyes were sharp and his features chiseled. His suit was navy, his shirt was bold stripes of blue and white, and his tie was bright red. The two shook hands firmly, their eyes at the same level. Luke liked Frank Ryan immediately. Please have a seat, Frank opened. I've asked some people to join us. As if on cue, 2 men entered the office. Luke stood and greeted Lewis Freeman from accounting and Dave Greenfield, a trader in the mortgage-backed securities department. Luke shook hands with both and noted Lewis's brown suit. Our company president, Alex Stewart, will meet there. He's the president of Stiller Stevens. I'm just the president of Stevens Securities. Just the president, Dave chided, as Lewis eyed Luke. Okay, Frank grinned boyishly. The locals grabbed their umbrellas, a must in the city, they said. The few blocks to Ben Benson's, a steakhouse, were dry. The overcast skies lay in abeyance, but the air was cool as Lewis and Dennis gently peppered Luke with questions. Where had he gone to school? How long had he been in the business? Had he really started his own firm? How old was he? Bachelor in business from a state university and a few hours short of political science and history degrees. Worked for a mortgage banking company while going to grad school at night, quit grad school to go to law school, passed the bar but didn't practice. 10 years in the business. Started his own company using the net worth he had built from real estate investments. 33. He answered as quickly as they fired. They each felt the chill of bait as they entered the restaurant and were led to a round table. Within moments, Alex Stewart arrived at the door. Several patrons at other tables stood and shook his hand and chatted as he slowly made his way through the dining room. See, Frank nodded to Luke as the group watched Alex inch toward them. There's the real president. Alex Stewart was in his 60s. His midriff was softening, but his gaze was stiff and sure. His strong pose was attached, and the New England accent gave him a learned air. How's the agriculture business in Oklahoma? He started as he seated himself. I really haven't a clue, Luke responded. I think high interest rates have to be hurting. For rural lenders, the declining value of farmland has to be a concern. But it's honestly, I don't know much about farming. You must come from the oil business then, Alex offered. I fill the tank once a week and change the oil every 2,500 miles. No, sir, sorry. I don't know the oil business either. You weren't involved in all the oil speculation, the boom and the bust of the last few years? Alex asked, referring to the rapid rise of oil prices in the late 70s after the Arab oil embargo, and the shortage of the gas pumps had fueled runaway gas prices. After a couple of years, the Saudis had unleashed their reserves, driving down prices and creating huge losses for oil lenders and speculators. No, sir, I stick to real estate and mortgage loans. Obviously, the boom and bust cycle of the oil industry affects our business. Many over-speculated in real estate as energy prices peaked inflation. I guess I was more conservative than some. Oh, that's right. You're the young mortgage fellow Frank was telling me about, Alex said, and turned as the waiter approached. I thought everyone in Oklahoma wore boots and a hat and was either in farming or oil. The Cheshire smile seemed poised to appear on Alex's face. You're much too traveled to think that, Luke bantered. You know full well there are 6 of us that have neither boots nor hats. Hearty orders followed. Steak au poivre, veal chop, liver and onions, and shrimp. Luke ordered veal piccata and settled into the room. Alex turned to the firm's top accountant. Lewis, I understand Mr. Boyd wants us to loan him $6 million with his promise to deliver $6 million in mortgage-backed securities within the next 5 days. It doesn't seem like good business to me. Tell me, Luke, what's the problem? Growth, profitable growth. Business is good. Our primary bank, Malvern, has agreed to increase our credit line to $35 million, but the documents won't be ready for another week. In the meantime, we have a shortfall. We have about $6 million to fund in the next few days, before the end of the month. We have about $6 million in mortgage-backed bonds to be delivered to you on the 1st of the month. Those certificates have been approved, and the bonds will be issued directly to you. We'd like for you to buy the bonds 5 days early. The money would repay a portion of the credit line with the bank and give us additional capacity until they can implement the increase. The bonds will then be delivered to you on the 1st and repay the advance we received from you. A few days later, we'll have our increase from Malvern, and our short-term credit crunch will be over. Don't you have other bank relationships, Alex asked? A couple of small ones. We have lines of credit with 3 other banks, but they each have $1 million legal lending limits. That's all they can lend to one borrower. Oklahoma doesn't have branch banking, so most banks are small and have low lending limits. We're at capacity with them now. They're holding loans pledged for bonds that you've agreed to purchase later in the month. Isn't your father-in-law a banker? Yes, Luke paused. That was a sore spot. It's a small bank. His is one of those with a low lending limit. Honestly, his rate is too high and we hate to use it. No family deal, Frank interjected. Oh, there's a family deal, all right. Just not a good one. Luke forced a grin. His face was younger than his years, but he wrinkled his forehead at the mention of his father-in-law. How do we buy bonds that don't exist? Lewis interjected. The bonds don't exist until they're issued, and we can't buy something that doesn't exist. I don't know all the rules, Luke admitted. But you have all the paperwork. You have the certificates showing the custodian has the mortgage documents, and you have the certificate numbers showing the bonds are approved. I've already signed the PD 1832s transferring the bonds to Stiller Stevens. So the bonds will be issued directly to you. I can't get the bonds back unless you transfer them to me. Alex spoke. Honestly, Luke, the solution seems to be delayed closing new loans. Get your credit increase and resume normal operations. Every business has a crunch from time to time. Yes, but banks have the Fed funds window where they can go borrow overnight, sometimes for months or weeks or months to shore up their liquidity. You can do similar things with repurchase agreements between brokers, but a mortgage banker doesn't have that last resource. To disrupt our closings, even for a day, sends a bad message to our customers. It's similar to a bank run. We can't afford to delay any loan closings without creating rumors and running the risk of destroying our business. Oklahoma is a sensitive market. There's been an oil bust and a medium-sized bank was closed last year. We have to be seen as stable and dependable. There are only 4 large banks in the state. 2 of them have mortgage companies, and I work for one of them. They didn't want me to resign. One bank doesn't do mortgage banking lines, so we deal with Malvern. Unfortunately, we'll have to go out of state someday, but we're not there yet. Many lenders are avoiding the region because of the oil bust. Colorado, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Texas have been nicknamed the Colt states, and they've been blacklisted. So you make money on the origination fees and the servicing, either collecting the servicing fee or selling the rights up front, Lewis asked. Yes, sir, Luke quickly replied. How do we buy bonds that don't exist? Lewis repeated. Dave quickly chimed in. Luke, I know our trading disc is risky. I occasionally enjoy it. He gave Alex a smile. But you guys are out there. You're making loans, banking the loans, running to pledge them for bonds, selling the bonds, getting paid, paying off the bank, and starting all over. You won't live any longer than bond traders. All that. The entrees arrived and the conversation settled in the generalities of weather, market, and sports. Over desserts, the business conversation became more pointed. Alex spoke first. Luke, we like your business, and we would like a long-term relationship. Please understand your request puts us in a difficult position. It's just not possible for us to purchase bonds before they're issued. You're asking us to loan you $6 million with no collateral. Alex, I fully expect to be charged interest. You can charge the regular repurchase agreement rate. That's the same rate that we're paying Malvern. And that's higher than the Fed funds rate, so you make a small spread for a few days. But please remember, we're at risk every time we sell our bonds to you. These bonds are going to be delivered directly to you, and I've already put them in your name. If anything were to happen to Stiller Stevens, where would I be? I'm not suggesting that that's even a possibility, but long-term relationships are built on trust. He paused a moment and added, and long-term relationships are the only ones worth having. Alex's eyes remained fixed on his coffee. Will you stay in town for the weekend? He asked. I'm not sure. I may try to find a theater ticket for this evening, otherwise I'll wait for the next trip. When David paid the bill, they all stood. Luke thanked him for lunch. At the curb, Alex excused himself, saying he had another meeting. Luke, Dave, and Lewis crossed 52nd Street as Frank lingered with Alex. Do you like New York? Lewis asked. I love New York. Luke smiled and inhaled the swirling scents. The city's growl echoed between the towers and whisked above the concrete and asphalt. Well, come back and visit us. Please understand, Alex is doing the right thing. We can't advance the money until we have the bonds. His voice was sincere. Do you have time to see the trading floor, Dave asked? You know we can call me when you can't reach John in Chicago. I can do your trades and he'll still get credit. You know he's calling me to get the price quotes when you call. Yes, I can hear your voice in the background. You have some great one-liners, Luke said. What do you mean? Dave deadpanned. He knew he had an arsenal of zingers and wondered which ones Luke had overheard. I love the one when I told John he was trying to buy my bonds too cheap, an eighth of a percent under the last trade, and I could hear you on the squawk box saying, tell him they're from my mother. That was probably Artie's voice. It was yours. Luke laughed. You know, my mother's a heck of a trader. Dave quipped. Frank caught up to the group as they entered the building lobby. He winked at Luke, leaned toward him, and whispered, You know, I learned something today. I used to think all the hustlers came from Brooklyn. Frank turned to Dave and said in a normal voice, Are you going to show him the trading floor? Sure, Dave offered. Great, Frank said. He turned to Luke. I'm going to leave you with Dave. He can show you around. I need to get to a meeting. I'm sure we have the wire instructions for your account. Lewis will be sending $6 million within the next hour. We do have the PD 1832s, don't we? Frank asked Lewis as he draped a hand on his shoulder. Yes, we just don't have the bonds, Lewis replied, his face in disbelief. Well, they should be here in 5 days. Let's be sure we get Luke's wire sent right away. We'll just charge the Fed funds rate. Frank nodded, took his arm back, and turned to Luke. That'll be 4.5% instead of 6%, and of course we won't charge any fees for early funding. Dave patted Lewis on the back as the two headed for the elevator. Thank you for your help, Luke said, and he and Frank shook hands firmly. I'm not a hustler, he said softly. Oh, you're a hustler, and that's a good thing. I'm from Brooklyn. Frank nodded. Thanks for coming to see us. Catch up with Dave, and I'll see the wires taken care of. Thank you.